The sun burned high in the pale blue sky, casting long, shimmering waves across the dry plains as though the world itself were holding its breath. Dust lifted from the earth with each whisper of wind, drifting like faint smoke toward a horizon that never seemed to end. Matthew rode quietly, his horse's hooves striking a steady rhythm against the hardened soil. He had lived long enough under that sun to know how silence could weigh heavier than words, how the land remembered every sorrow and every promise broken. He wasn't riding with expectation, not really. He was riding because something inside him would not let him ignore the rumors he'd overheard in town, the whispers of a widow and her children left to starve on the far edge of nowhere. When he reached the small homestead, his chest tightened with the sight. The cabin leaned against itself like an old man struggling to stay upright, its roof caving in at one corner, shutters dangling loose. In the yard, the grass had died long ago, leaving only brittle stalks rattling against each other like bones. And there she was, Mary, pale and thin, but holding herself with a stubborn dignity that caught his breath. She stood in the doorway with one hand braced against the frame, as if she alone held the cabin together. Beside her, a little girl clung to her skates, eyes wide and too hollow for 6 years of age. A small boy peeked from behind her leg, his hair tangled, cheeks sunken but gaze sharp. Matthew dismounted slowly, the leather creaking beneath his weight, and tipped his hat against the glare of the sun. "Afternoon," he said softly, voice steady, respectful. Mary's lips tightened. "We don't need charity." He hadn't offered it yet, but the words stung just the same. Her tone carried not hostility but a wounded pride, the kind that came from too many days of hearing pity in other people's voices. He studied her face, worn with grief but still striking, still carrying the quiet beauty of someone who had endured too much. Her husband had died 2 years ago, he recalled from the gossip. Since then, the town had done little more than whisper about her misfortunes, each tale darker than the last. "I didn't come with charity," Matthew said at last, his voice low. "I came because no one should be left to wither out here." Amy, the little girl, clutched tighter to her mother, eyeing him like a stranger in the dark. The boy, Carl, ducked farther behind, fingers digging into his mother's dress. Their silence spoke louder than any hunger pains could. Mary's eyes narrowed. "We're fine." He glanced at the cracked boards of the porch, at the empty bucket by the door, at the way her collarbones showed sharp beneath her dress. The word fine rang hollow, but he didn't argue. Instead, he pulled the canteen from his belt and crouched, holding it out toward Amy. His movements were slow, deliberate, gentle. "It's warm out," he murmured. "You thirsty, little one?" Amy looked up at her mother, who hesitated, then gave the faintest nod. The girl stepped forward, tiny fingers wrapping around the metal, lifting it to her lips. Water spilled down her chin, and for a fleeting moment she laughed, a soft, surprised laugh that cracked through the heavy silence like light through shutters. Matthew smiled faintly. "There now. World doesn't feel quite so cruel with a sip of water, does it?" Carl peeked out again, curious. Matthew reached into his full bag and pulled out a small carved horse, its edges worn smooth from his own boyhood. He held it out. "Found this lying around. Looks like it's been waiting for someone your size." The boy's eyes lit with recognition of play, of something beyond hunger and fear. Slowly, he reached out, taking the toy and clutching it tight. He didn't speak, but Matthew caught the flicker of gratitude. Mary crossed her arms, shoulders taut. "You don't need to do this." "I know," he said simply, "but I want to." Her gaze faltered for the first time. He stayed longer than he'd planned, repairing a loose shutter, patching the roof with boards he found in the shed. Mary didn't ask him to, but she handed him nails and a hammer when he reached for them, her fingers brushing his once, sending a quiet current through them both. The children played in the dust, Amy twirling with laughter, Carl chasing after her with the wooden horse held high. For the first time in too long, sound filled the hollow yard. From the road, neighbors watched, their whispers carried by the dry wind. Matthew ignored them. Gossip had never raised a child nor filled an empty belly. By evening, as the sun dropped low and painted the cabin gold, Matthew stepped back to admire his work. The roof wasn't whole, but it would keep the rain out. Mary stood beside him, hands clasped, her profile etched by the last light of day. He wanted to say something, anything, but words caught in his throat. Instead, He gave a small nod and turned to leave. "Wait," Mary said quietly. He toned. She swallowed hard, voice unsteady. "Why are you really here?" He considered the question, the ache behind it. "Because people said you were alone. And I don't believe anyone should be left that way." Her eyes glistened, but she blinked it away. "You'll only make it worse. Folks will talk. They already do." He tipped his hat. Let them. Days turned into weeks. Matthew returned with supplies, but always framed them as trade. He brought eggs, she offered bread. He brought wood, she gave him stitching. Pride mattered, and he would not strip her of it. Each visit became less about the things he carried and more about the silences they shared. One evening, lamplight flickered through the cracks of her cabin. Mary sat sewing by the fire, her children asleep in the corner. Matthew fixed a door hinge, the soft scrape of his knife blending with the crackle of the fire. Neither spoke for a long while. The air between them was thick, not with unease but with the weight of things unspoken. Finally, Mary whispered, "They say I'm cursed, that everything I touch crumbles." Matthew paused, looking at her. People say many things to fill the silence of their own loneliness. Her hands trembled slightly on the fabric. She didn't reply, but something in her shoulders eased. Yet the town did not let them be. Neighbors murmured louder, warning Matthew that she was a burden, that she would ruin him. Mary overheard whispers at the well, each word slicing deeper than the last. She confronted Matthew one afternoon, her face pale with resolve. "Don't come back," she said firmly. He froze. "Mary, I won't have you ruining your name for me." "I can't." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. "Go, please." His chest burned. He turned toward his horse, each step heavy, but when he glanced back, he saw Amy's small hand pressed to the window, her eyes pleading silently. The sight shattered his restraint. He strode back to Mary, voice raw. "You think this is pity? Mary, it's not pity to want a home with you. It's not sacrifice. It's love." Her breath caught, tears brimming. He stepped closer, every word trembling with truth. "I don't care what they say. I've watched you fight for dignity when most would have given up. I've seen you hold your children together with nothing but your own will. That isn't weakness, Mary. That's strength. And I want to stand beside it. Beside you." She shook her head, breaking into sobs, years of grief spilling free. When he reached for her, she collapsed into his arms, clinging as though she'd finally found solid ground. The children wrapped their arms around them both, small voices muffled against their clothes. From his pocket, Matthew pulled a silver ring, worn smooth with age. "This was my mother's," he whispered. "I've kept it all these years. Not for charity, not for rescue. For love. Mary, will you be my partner in this life?" Her tears shone in the dim light, and with a trembling breath, she whispered, "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, the gesture simple yet monumental, binding them not with grand ceremony but with quiet truth. That night, they sat together beneath the stars outside the cabin, the children asleep inside. Mary leaned against him, her hand in his, the ring glinting softly. The world around them was still harsh, still filled with whispers and judgment, but in that moment, it felt far away. Sometimes love did not come with thunder or fire, but with a steady hand refusing to let go, even when the world pressed against it. And to you, dear listener of this tale, remember this: dignity is not in hiding your hunger nor silencing your grief. It is in letting another hold part of your burden, in accepting that love can be as quiet as a hand extended, as patient as a man who waits outside a broken cabin until someone finally lets him in. The road may be long, the world unkind, but sometimes, against the dust and the sun and the weight of gossip, love still finds its way home. Before you ride off, tell me where in the wide world you're watching from.